Well, hi all, and welcome to Achieving Success with Database as a Service. Today's awesome webinar is sponsored by DataStax and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Jess Steinbuck with Actual Tech Media, and I am so happy to be your moderator for this Tech Talk because actually I love Tech Talks. they're just a ton of fun. The idea behind the Tech Talk series is to keep things short and punchy. We know that you're all busy humans, so these mini sessions give us all the chance to sit down with an expert for a quick chat about trending industry issues and ideas. Now, speaking of trending, I think we're all hearing a lot about data. We hear about it all the time. So whether you're talking about collecting it, maybe thinking about storing it, how to apply it, or protecting it, data is top of mind for most organizations. And today we're going to zoom in on a few things, including fast data, real-time data, and data storage using database as a service. These are all really interesting and faceted topics, and we're so lucky to have an expert here from DataStax to walk us through all of them and explore some real-world examples and applications. I know that you are all just as excited as I am to chat with our speaker today, so I'm going to just zip through a few of the important housekeeping things, and then we will get this session rolling. Okay, so first, let's take a look at your audience console together. Now, there's two key things that I want to point out in there. One is the questions tab and one is the handouts tab. Let's start by looking at that questions tab. So the best part of a Tech Talk session is, well, you guessed it, the talking. So today you have a chance to ask questions directly of a data expert. So make sure to get those questions into that live chat window. Now, if you do have any issues today and you need a little support from the Actual Tech Media team, no problem. You can throw those in the questions tab as well. I do want to remind you that a browser refresh is going to get rid of any of the usual tech gremlins, but if they're particularly persistent today, let us know. Also, a note on the questions there. If we do have a little bit of a quicker question and answer session today, sometimes in these Tech Talks, because they are so fast, we don't get to all the questions. Don't worry about that. All of the questions are going to go to the DataStax team after the fact, so there you will get a chance to kind of hear back from them and dig into those questions a little bit more later. All right, now I said that there were two key things, so let's look at that handout section of your audience console. If you click into the handouts tab, you're going to find some great resources to go along with the webinar today. You can check out some upcoming webinars, read through the Gorilla Guide book club, and best of all, make sure to click on that DataStax link and start exploring some of their resources as well. Just some awesome reading there for you. And hey, it is not just fascinating content that we are giving away today. We also have a $300 Amazon gift card as a prize drawing at the end of our webinar. Now, of course, you must be in live attendance at the webinar to qualify for the prize. And if you have questions about what the actual terms and conditions are around our prize giveaways, no problem. Head on back to that handouts tab, click in, scroll down to the bottom, and you can find the full T's and C's waiting for you there. All right, well, that is all the housekeeping information. So now let's get into our session. Now, I do want to remind you again that the Tech Talk format is a bit different than a usual webinar. So think less formal presentation and more coffee table chat with a fun expert. And this one's going to be awesome. I am so excited to introduce Matt Overstreet, Field CTO Cloud at DataStax. Matt, thank you so much for joining us here today to talk about DataStax.
Great to be here. I feel like I should have a clown nose to be a fun expert.
Just to really kick off the chat on a good note. Hey, Matt, I want to ask you a question before we jump in, because there's a lot we're going to talk about today, but I keep hearing this term fast data thrown around. What does DataStax mean when they talk about fast data?
Oh, we love to talk about fast data. So the short version of that is that fast data is data that is as near to real-time data as it possibly can be. And that means that you can use it as soon as it comes into your system.
Okay, I like that. And I want to come back. I have more questions about real-time data, but first, I know that DataStax has a history of helping on some pretty significant data projects across the spectrum of Fortune 500 companies. So give us the inside scoop, Matt. Tell us a little bit about what you've seen. And I'm really curious kind of what stands out about DataStax and Cassandra in these particular cases that you've been a part of.
I'm happy to. And I actually came out of the field at DataStax. So I've been out working on some of these problems. And the first thing that struck me, I think, when I started doing this was, I don't know if everybody else has this same need to decide what big data is. Everybody would say, oh, do I have big data? Do I have big data? That was the first question. And it occurred to me at some point, and this will come into fast data or slow data or whatever. It occurred to me that big was an adjective, sort of like heavy, right? It didn't describe the data. It described how the data felt to you. If you had a call list and an Excel spreadsheet and you just didn't know a lot about computers and you were trying to organize a soccer team or whatever, that could be the experience of big data. Or you could manage petabytes of data and it could be agile the whole time. And big was this description of like what happens when your data is no longer useful. It's the opposite of agile data. And we'll talk about that. Like that leads into this idea of like a fast data, or even maybe this idea of like what would a data maturity model look like as a practice inside one of these Fortune 500 companies? What is that where do people start? What's the first level of like gathering some competency around data? And then what's that top level of like, I'm fully mature and I'm one of the companies that's most successful working with data? And that probably starts at like something really low level. Like I just want to know that everything's saved and not going away. And then I want to know that I can mine data. A lot of us live at that layer where we just want to know that the data is there and that even if a query takes 2 minutes or whatever, it's accessible. And then maybe that next level of that maturity model is something like real-time or fast data, where not only is the data available to query, but the data is available to make really fast decisions. And this is a little tricky, but the data is also really able to make fast decisions wherever your system is. So a lot of us will build a tower in the East Coast of the US or in the West Coast, and then we'll have users come in from India as our projects get bigger, or IoT devices. And maybe their reads are fast, but their writes are really slow because that's not fast data where they are. So maybe that next level of the competency model is like figuring out where data lives in order to be fast and very agile. And then there's probably something magical on top, like data self-realization, where we get rid of all the noise and only save the good stuff and know what people want before they even ask for it. But that, to me, sort of in a roundabout way frames that big data, fast data, big data, agile data too. Like we want to know we have it, but then how do we get better at deploying it and deploying it in something that feels more like real time so that it's there when we need it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I really like the way that you're kind of framing that, because especially when you were talking about big data is sort of, in a way, what is big to you? Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes we get so caught up. You and I were chatting about buzzwords earlier, and I think sometimes we get so caught up in titles and labels. But what I'm hearing is sort of recentering it to actually, yeah, but what do you actually need? What is important to you, to your organization?
Reminds me of a long time ago, I looked at a English translation of a French website, and they were advertising Windows 2000 Waiter. And it occurred to me, wait, that's all server is, isn't it? An application of your laptop is to dig a hole, right? These words are simple words to describe the simple things that we want to do, and we get lost in language. We think it's special. Yeah, right. Absolutely, to your point. And it's nice to sometimes just sit down and level set about what we actually mean when we talk about things like fast or big or whatever. And a lot of times those are relative to our ability to do something, not some magical number.
Yeah. And when you simplify, it feels more approachable. Sometimes we get caught up in the hype or the buzzword of it. It can feel really overwhelming.
Yeah. I might have even occasionally hidden behind a buzzword when I need to look smart.
I think we're all pretty guilty of that from time to time. Okay, well, I do actually want to dig in on one of the terms that we just heard you use, and that's real-time data. So, real-time data is important for data leaders, and also that committing to real-time data could really benefit an organization. We started this with you defining fast data, and now we're talking about real-time data. So when do we cross over from what is fast data and what is real-time data, and why is real-time data important?
here's something kind of cool, even before I get into that too, just as you talk about it. We don't quite have these numbers out, but we pay a lot of attention to the database market, the people that are working in the database market. We like to know what the state of the data world is. And we'll probably publish something about that here again soon. But one of the things that was surprising to me is for the people that identified as being in real-time data, how do I say this? There were all these really amazing corollaries as they pushed into it. And there was like, oh yeah, we make more money because we actually pay attention to real-time data, and like we're responsive in our ability to deploy that data to a problem and decision like on the edge or in the millisecond or whatever. But what shocked me too is we were getting these good reports from technologists too, where they actually were more optimistic about the future of the stack they were working on when they were able to answer these questions quickly. And obviously we saw some, improvements in engagement or whatever. Anyway, that It surprised me how much it sort of excited the technicians to be in a space where they weren't waiting a little while.
That's some interesting psychology in there. I like that.
So if you want to be happier, I guess what I'm saying is real-time data. But
perfect. Yes, that's the key takeaway from this. The core of happiness, real-time data.
In a way, the less time we spend in uncertainty. And maybe that's the axis, right? Like to bring that back down to earth is we have this idea of mining data, and that can take however long it takes, and maybe it's worth it. And then we have this idea of fast data, and maybe that's for a human less than 100 milliseconds, particularly if you're talking about like an interaction with the web. And then you dig down to this idea of real-time data, and that's, as soon as anywhere in your ecosystem it comes in, you can get it back out. And certainly like in e-com, so much work has been done around this idea of getting down below 100 milliseconds. And even then, as you're compositing systems together, it's not okay for just one of those interactions to be under 100 milliseconds. You want to give everybody the world in 10 milliseconds or less, which is tricky to get to.
Yeah. So my takeaways are time and happiness coming from data. I like this. Okay, well, so besides the key to happiness, for anyone out there in the audience right now who might be thinking to themselves, great, and why should I be considering outsourcing my database needs? What do you say to that?
Yeah, that's kind of the crux of it. So like, it's of this discussion really, because I think what we want to get to is not just real-time data is important, but this underlying thing of, you should be looking at real-time data systems like Apache Cassandra, like DataStax Astra. But the flip side to that is, well, hey, haven't I just deployed like another swim lane for my data? And now I've got a whole other operations organization to put in, and I've got a whole nother set of technical competencies to put in, and a whole nother set of things to figure out. And I also have to learn what fast data is and how to use it successfully. And I'm probably going to mess that up the first time. And that's a lot of moving parts all coming together. And we, as much as we saw in the survey that we've done, or the surveys we've done historically, customers profiting from fast data like Cassandra, we saw them also struggling with operationalizing that. So you would have maybe these smaller companies are less technically savvy in a very general sense. Companies hit this wall when they tried to start to deploy these fast data systems. And so my first statement about why you should run it in the cloud is you should run it in the cloud because you should take your smartest people and apply them to problems that distinguish you. And you should borrow everything else. And running things in the cloud oftentimes is borrowing that operational and technical expertise, that stuff that you shouldn't take the time to build up, so that you can instead spend that creative energy on the things that, I guess I said distinguish, but distinguish what you're doing.
Wow. Yeah, Matt, I almost reached for my pen and paper to write that down while you were speaking, because that hit really hard. I think that's a good sort of takeaway for everybody in the audience today, is, and is sort of the essence of what we're trying to do with a lot of these tools and solutions, is take out some of the things that don't need to necessarily be human time from your team, and let your team really shine. And
you've probably got some really smart people if you're running Cassandra already, because you needed it to solve some big, amazing problem. And now you can release that team to go solve other big, amazing problems, and then apply that same technology that you had to invest in without that operational investment. It's kind of amazing. I'm super excited about it.
I love that. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, you're making me want to run out and sign up myself. Before I leave you all, though, yeah. I always love to get some examples, sort of real-time examples. I think for me that helps kind of illustrate what's possible. It's great to kind of speak in the cloud, so to speak, but it's nice to come back down to the world we live in as well, and see how things can really be applied. So I'm wondering if you could give our audience some specific examples of or two of how real-time data is actually used.
Yeah. So moving a little bit away from hosted or as a service, these are probably the ones that I love are probably a little older, so I don't want to imply that they're out on Astra, although they absolutely could be. There's kind of a cool one, and then one that maybe they're just both cool. The two that hop to mind as real-time data stories are I think of Starbucks, but we could generalize this to anything. I think of Starbucks's mobile app and purchasing and personalization and inventory management and all those things that gave them the ability to take that phone in your hand and turn it into part of that retail experience without like constantly disappointing you, either by taking too long or by just being wrong. If I tell you that I can give you something and then I can't give it to you, that's a problem. And in the data mining world, when I'm dealing with inventory, I might make a guess about whether or not I can fulfill something to you. In the real-time data or fast data world, I can tell you if you can have something and when I can get it to you. And I'm doing less speculating. And that makes that experience of walking up and ordering something with my phone or dealing with personalization or whatever much better, which leads to the other one that I always think of, which is the Home Depot did this really cool thing right as we all started to struggle with how we were going to manage COVID and how we were going to get the stuff we needed. And the Home Depot rolled out their curbside pickup, which that needs to be real time and it needs to be right.
Yeah.
Right. And they rolled it out. I don't think it was a month, but it wasn't much more than that. And so you had this agility combined with this real-time problem. The Home Depot stores are full of a lot of stuff. But they were able to put that together and actually do like curbside fulfillment. They could meet the customer wherever they showed up with whatever it is they wanted and not, constantly disappoint them by not having it or not having it when they needed it. It was really cool to watch that. And they did it fast.
They did, yeah. And now it's funny. I'm so used to curbside pickup, and here in Canada we have Canadian Tire. They have locker pickups, and you get like a code, and the locker door pops open. And I sometimes wonder how we did without that, and that changed like that.
I need somebody to take real-time data. They can do it on Astra and build a predictive sushi place that uses that real-time data so that when I drive through the drive-through, they've got fresh food for me. I can order it before, or they just know what I want before I get there. And I honestly don't think we're very far from that. Like, we've been caching for a long time, and we're getting to real-time and predicting, and it's cool to watch.
And this is another conversation, I'm sure, but I'm always curious when we flirt with that line and how audience members feel about that personalization and ease versus getting into a place. If you pull up to a restaurant and they hand you your favorite food, are you thinking, oh, wow, thank you so much, that's exactly what I wanted? Or are you thinking, how did you know that?
I fear that this reference is a little bit too dated, but there's an old TV show called Northern Exposure. Do you know Northern Exposure, about a doctor that ends up in Alaska?
Yes.
And he goes to the store And the lady that works at the store is named Ruth Ann, and Ruth Ann will sometimes remind you that you haven't bought toilet paper in a little while. And when Ruth Ann does it, it's perfectly charming, right? Like that somebody would know you that well.
Yes.
And we get a little afraid when we talk about machines doing it, but there is a version of this, if privacy stuff is implemented well, where it's more Ruth Ann than, fear of leaking all my data. And there's something really nice about that. I don't know how we settle in and decide we like it, but I was always kind of jealous that if Joel Fleischman forgot to get ketchup for a little while, the register would tell him, or Ruth would tell him that.
I love that. I think that's probably the best explanation I've ever heard for, personalization and that sort of creepy versus convenience line is just to think of it as Ruth Ann, of what people in smaller towns grew up with and knowing and having that kind of connection to the people around them. And I understand that it's a machine and not people, and we still want those people in our lives. But interesting to find ways to kind of change that narrative around it, around the charm of it, and hopefully we wouldn't ever lose the Ruth Anns and
right.
different elements of it.
Yep. And it all comes down to how much we trust whatever Ruth Ann we end up with. But that's probably a whole other conversation.
Right. Yeah. Well, we are getting close to the end of our time here. And I want to sneak in a few audience questions before we wrap. So, this one here, I think is a great one to kind of address. We have an audience member wondering how Datastax AstraDB is different. What is unique? What makes it stand out?
So the quick version is, one of the awesome things about Cassandra is you can geoscale with it. You don't hear that word very often, and maybe I just made it up. But getting your data East Coast, West Coast, Europe, and Asia in real time is something that is almost singularly like a Cassandra thing. Other places will do it, or other database approaches will do it, but they don't do it quite the same way. And it's worth looking at how Cassandra does it and Astra does it. Astra is also built on open source, which is pretty phenomenal. It's built on the open source Cassandra project, so you have that type of visibility. It has this phenomenal Stargate gateway, so you don't have to write CQL anymore. You can talk REST or GraphQL, so the barrier to entry goes way down. And the other thing that I'm super excited about is you can start with Astra and get $25 a month in free credits or whatever our entry is, and you don't ever have to worry about outgrowing that. Like, there are some NoSQL solutions where you will hit a wall if you get big enough. Cassandra starts easy and scales just forever, which is, I think, an amazing. I don't have to schedule that, rebuild my whole system when I finally get successful, because I started in the right way, but I don't have to start in a hard way either.
I love that. And actually that plays in really well with another question I want to ask you here. So we have an audience member mentioning, you brought up some bigger names, you were talking about Starbucks and Home Depot. So kind of wondering about, first, their question is, are these enterprises actually using database as a service? And then for them, for their own organizations, and maybe that are a bit smaller or different size enterprises, is it actually safe for them to use?
Yeah, I think so. More and more the big enterprises are playing, but they have big deployments already on premise. And a lot of the as a service up to now, and this is not exclusive, like there are big players that have come into it. A lot of what we're seeing is smaller businesses or closer to startups coming in because they don't have to reinvent the wheel operationally. They get all the power without having to do that team and skills investment, like the whole no-op story that I kind of alluded to earlier. So I'd say we see more sort of startups, but whatever reservation existed a few years ago about the cloud seems to just be completely melting away, because the upside is so much bigger, and the risk probably existed in your existing data center anyway, if we really do that analysis. So it seems to be winning, and more power, because why run the engine if somebody else will run it for you?
Ooh, I like that. That's a good line there. Okay, so running a little short, but I'm going to sneak in one more question here, because I think this is maybe one that a few people in the audience can relate to. Why did I need one database 10 years ago, and now I need various layers and examples they're giving: fast, slow, search, etc.? Yeah,
because there is no magic one solution to solve all your problems, but you really want to meet the customers where they are. You need search indices to solve human speech problems and different types of range lookups and whatever. And you need fast data layers to make sure that distribute well in a geo scale, to make sure that you're not punishing customers on the other side of the world for what you have going on here, or you're not, essentially creating queues inside your databases that are just like waiting online wherever else you're used to waiting online. Like, we need lots and lots of autonomy between the servicing our customers, and those come from things like fast data layers. And then you probably want something that lets you do really deep intelligence and looks like a traditional relational database, or looks like a Hadoop implementation or a Spark implementation. And right now, there is no way to make all of those exist in one place, but they all have so much benefit that learning how to get them to coexist is very valuable.
All right. Well, hopefully that's, I think that's a great answer. That answers my questions. But for those of you who asked a question that we didn't get to, or if you have follow-ups and clarifications, please do get those into the questions tab still. We're going to send them all to Matt and the DataStax team, so you will get follow-ups from them. You will have a chance to hear back. Matt, before you run away, if someone wants to get started with DataStax, and I'm sure there's a whole audience full of converts out there, what do you suggest as a first step? How do they get rolling here?
Oh man, just go to astra.datastax.com, but also docs.datastax.com is one of my favorite things in the company. So like, if you want to get started, go to Astra, set up an account. It's not going to cost you anything. There's example projects there. You'll be doing something faster than you even realize, because you just get it spun up and start putting data into it. Or reach out. I'm happy to talk about what people are trying to build. Yeah.
Well, I love that. And clearly you're a pleasure to chat with, Matt. This has just been awesome. And hey, we all got the key to happiness today.
Who knew? Who knew?
Well, this has just been a blast. Thank you so much for coming to chat with us, Matt.
Thank you.
And a special thank you to all of you out in the audience today who asked some amazing questions. Honestly, that's such a big part of what makes these conversations so fun to be a part of, is the chance to interact with all of you. And speaking of fun, I know you see it up on the screen there. It is time for a prize giveaway. I'm going to remind you again that you must be present at the live webinar here with me today in order to win. So the winner of today's $300 Amazon gift card is Erica McCardle of Massachusetts. Erica McCardle of Massachusetts, congratulations. You have won a $300 Amazon gift card. And as always, we will be in touch about claiming your prize after the webinar wraps today. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank both DataStax for making this Tech Talk possible, and a giant thank you again to Matt for such a fun chat. At the start of this, Matt said he thought he was going to need the clown nose to bring out the fun expert, but I think he did a pretty good job of bringing the fun today all on his own. I hope you enjoyed the chat as much as I did, and I hope you feel powered up to start some more research on your own. Don't forget to head to the DataStax website and check out some of the resources that they've got there. And hey, whether it's a tech talk, maybe an expert series session, a summit, a megacast, or an EcoCast, I can't wait to see you all at a webinar again soon. And until then, I hope you have an absolutely beautiful rest of your day.